Gentleman from Alexander, Mr. Levine.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman rise for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I'll yield.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask the gentleman, and I have the bill in front of me, it says that person is defined as a religious organization or someone connected with a religious organization. And then it says that no person shall be required to participate in the solemnization of any marriage. And I would ask the gentleman, Mr. Speaker, which person in Virginia is required by law to participate in the solemnization of any marriage?
I would answer, gentlemen, the primary concern here, again, has to do with the governor's executive order, where he has made it very clear that certain religious institutions would not be able to engage in state contracts for a variety of things, to include things like refugee resettlement, because they hold to a position that marriage is between a man or a woman. So, again, it's not as if we have a specific case where a pastor, priest, rabbi, imam has been required to do this. But, again, the concern comes from the governor's positive actions with respect to his executive order.
Mr. Speaker, a follow-up question. Will the gentleman yield?
Will the gentleman yield?
I'll yield.
The gentleman yields.
So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask the gentleman, is there any person in Virginia that he's aware of that is required by law, executive order, or any other legal compulsion is required to participate in the solemnization of any marriage, which is what line 31 of the bill says? Does he know of any?
The question is after the governor's executive order, would someone, maybe they wouldn't be required to perform the marriage. The question is, would they be punished if they refused to perform a marriage that didn't coincide with their religious beliefs, Mr. Speaker?
I thank the gentleman.
The gentleman from Alexander, Mr. Levine.
Mr. Speaker, also speaking to the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman, the patron of the bill, has, as far as I can see, basically conceded that the first part of the bill, that somehow someone is required to participate in solemnization of any marriage, there isn't anyone required to do that. His concern, I guess, is with the second part of the bill, that people might be penalized if they somehow discriminate against gay families. So I don't know an example in Virginia, I concede that, but I can tell you that there's a woman at my synagogue who was married to, it wasn't legal at the time, so she was with her female partner in Texas for more than 20 years. She was also estranged from her family for more than 20 years because her family would not accept her as a lesbian woman. This was the woman's partner. The woman's partner died, and as she was dying, the family came in and excluded the woman I know, the woman that she'd been with for 20 years, excluded her from the hospital room because there were no protections in Texas, excluded her from any kind of inheritance. They didn't have a will. And basically the family came in, and this poor woman died with people that she did not get along with and was not allowed to be with her partner of 20 years. It seems to me that hospitals should allow people to be with their loved ones. And if the purpose of this bill is to separate loved ones as they're dying, then I think that's a very bad point of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Culpeper, Mr. Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
I can't say it enough, Mr. Speaker, that the point of this bill is not to separate loved ones. The point of this bill is not to bring offense to anybody within the homosexual, the LGBTQ community. I realize that regardless of my intentions, that may be the effect for some people, but it certainly is not the intent. The problem is there are going to be key questions that people disagree on. And if it were up to me, government would not even be involved in the question of marriage. I would love it if government just got out of this question altogether, and if we just treated marriage like a civil contract. I would like it to be just a civil contract between two people, and then my definition of marriage, which will never change because it's given to me by Scripture, I can go and exercise that, and someone else that has a different description of it, they can go into the private sector and they can find a church, synagogue, mosque, secular institution, whatever it is, to define it for them. I would be happy with that, but that's not the reality we live in right now. And unfortunately, this governor has decided, because when I see this, Mr. Speaker, what I see is targeting religious organizations, religious charities. Again, I heard 3 eloquent speeches with respect to refugee resettlement yesterday. All right, and while I agree with President Trump on certain things, I disagree on others. And I will say this, the idea that we would take Catholic charities, or that this executive order could potentially exclude Catholic charities from being able to serve that purpose of successfully resettling refugees is a problem. And so I would just say that, again, at the end of the day, there's no offense meant by this bill. Again, I wish it wasn't necessary. But as long as we have people that are willing to occupy the governor's office or come here in order to force one side of this debate to agree with them by punishing them through the government, we're going to continue to have bills like this that seek to protect those institutions. So with that, Mr. Speaker, again, I would just reiterate, I hope it'll be the will of the body to engross the bill and move it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? No. Bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.